This is from the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net.
This video is mainly about two academic ignorances in the earth sciences. This is September 27, 2017. I'm again in my Russian home. And the 2 points to be clarified here are, one, the problem that the sun was faint at the time life formed, and it creates, in academic minds, the book learners, it's a problem to understand, but it really is no problem. The earth faced the sun, the same spot faced the sun at the earlier stages of life development. Yes, it would have been cold if it was spinning. It would have been below freezing, but the only one face of the earth was collecting the heat from the sun rays, and that created an interesting environment in the planet built up called Pangaea. And then 65 million years ago, the moon, which had been approaching closer and closer, had a swipe on the back. The moon is 1/6 the size of the earth, and it swiped the earth from the back, breaking up Pangaea and spreading it around the globe. You can see very clearly when you look at North and South America where they were together. So the collision was exactly opposite this point in the Pacific. So you could locate that, but it spread that out, and it spread this. There's this whole ring has dinosaur bones all the way down into South America, and it has nothing to do with plate tectonics. That's the second ignorance that we'll talk about. The Antarctica was flipped down there by the hit on the opposite side of the Earth by the moon swiping. So let's get into these two things. I first show the videos with the academic ignorance and then try to help with the clarification. This is about the academic ignorance in earth science of the paradox of the faint young sun.
Hi, this is Emily. In 1972, Carl Sagan and a colleague discovered something that's come to be known as the faint young sun paradox. According to stellar physics, our sun has been growing brighter over time thanks to increasing hydrogen fusion in the star's core. This means that the sun that shined on early Earth was roughly 25% dimmer than today's sun, which should have kept our baby planet cool enough for ice at the poles to grow and reflect more sunlight and cool the planet further, producing a literal snowball effect and turning Earth into a big ice cube. But, according to rock and fossil evidence, ancient Earth was actually a melty, warm, watery haven for life, where simple single-celled organisms developed and thrived. Hence the paradox. How could the sun be dim but the Earth warm?
That's a good question, and the answer is easy. One face of the Earth was towards the sun before 65 million years ago, and that face of the Earth, a ring of life built up around it, hot in the center, cold on the outside, but a ring of just right, with a water, the cycle of weather, making an environment that life thrived. So that's how easy that is. Now let's go ahead and hear their ignorant responses.
Scientists have proposed a range of possible explanations, but the most likely one is that Earth's early atmosphere included one or more ultra-insulating gases that kept its surface unseasonably toasty. We still don't know for sure what these gases were or where they came from, but scientists have been toying with an intriguing possibility that whatever created Earth's mega greenhouse effect also supplied key ingredients for life. One hypothesis is that a constant barrage of rocky debris left over from the creation of the solar system melted sizable chunks of Earth, releasing greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, and drawing sulfur, an essential component of some amino acids, up to the surface. Another out-of-this-world hypothesis points to the sun itself. Magnetic storms on the sun's surface unleash streams of high-energy particles into space. Today, these so-called solar winds can disrupt Earth's magnetic shield enough to penetrate the atmosphere and interact with gases, giving rise to the auroras. But back when our sun was a baby, it threw much wilder tantrums, hurling violent streams of high-energy particles that interacted with Earth's primordial atmosphere much more frequently to create large amounts of two gases: nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas 300 times as powerful as carbon dioxide, and hydrogen cyanide, a poison that can, ironically, also help produce some basic building blocks of life. Whatever the real story, it's safe to say that our early Earth somehow managed to create a perfect home for life under the faint young sun. And it's also safe to say that as our sun continues to burn ever brighter into the future, Earth's climate will snowball in another, hotter direction, eventually boiling away both water and life under the bright old sun.
The eventual demise of the Earth as a place to live is true, but we've already shown that human life can live in a spacecraft. It needs much support, but we can develop the technology to be able to live, to get to and live in other places than Earth.
This video is supported by the Heising-Simons Foundation, unlocking knowledge, opportunity, and possibilities. To learn more about the foundation and about its science program, which supports fundamental research primarily in the physical sciences, visit www.heisingsimons.org. Thanks, Heising-Simons!
Hey, maybe they'll support my website so when I'm gone it doesn't get dumped in the bucket. Now for the next academic ignorance in earth science that you have to memorize to pass the course.
The idea that our planet's continents drift around the globe, periodically glomming together and breaking apart, is at least 200 years old. But most geologists didn't believe it until the 1960s.
By the end of the 1800s, abstract intellectualism had begun to dominate the universities. There was so much pressure to pass tests that the opportunity for children to play and experience reality was less and less. And the common sense that came with that was less and less, where they were reading books with someone else's interpretation and developing high intellectualism, just like the Jewish background of memorization, and how many wonderful efforts there were for social revolution in rebellion against the indoctrination, but they had been deprived of the experience of children running out and playing in the woods and in having the common sense of being on a swing, being on a merry-go-round, just being the age of cars brought, they don't even walk down the road anymore or go in a carriage or experience those physical realities. They just sit in a car seat, locked in the car, and then locked in the apartment with a book to memorize so they can pass a test. And the academic ignorance just grows from there. It's about time we back up and learn by experiment rather than memorizing what someone else has said.
When mounting evidence made it clear that the Earth's crust is broken up into fragments, and that those fragments, called tectonic plates, are moving. And these days we directly track that motion, with millimeter precision, from space. The common simplified explanation for why tectonic plates are moving is that they're carried along on currents in the upper mantle, the slowly flowing layer of rock just below Earth's crust. Converging currents drive plates into each other, diverging currents pull them apart. This is mostly true. Hot mantle rock rises from the core and moves along under the crust until it grows cool and heavy and sinks back down again. But the plates aren't just passively riding these currents around like a bunch of suitcases at the baggage claim. They can't be, because some of the plates are moving faster than the currents underneath them. For example, the Nazca Plate, a chunk of ocean crust off the west coast of South America, is cruising eastward at about 10 centimeters per year, while the mantle underneath it oozes along at just 5. Neither tectonic plates nor luggage can move faster than the belts they're riding on unless something else is helping to push or pull them along. And some of Earth's plates, it turns out, are pulling themselves. When an ocean plate collides with another ocean plate, or a plate bearing the thick crust of continental landmasses, the thinner of the two plates bends and slides under the other. As the edge of the sea floor sinks into the mantle, it pulls on the plate behind it, the same way a chain dangling further and further off a table will eventually start to slide. The bigger the sunken portion of the plate becomes, the harder it pulls and the faster the remaining plate behind it moves. You can find where this is happening just by looking at Google Earth. The incredibly deep, narrow ocean trenches visible off the coasts of some continents and island chains mark the creases formed as ocean crust plunges downward, bending the edge of its neighbor in the process. What's more, these chunks of seafloor are actually helping to drive convection in the mantle beneath them. Sunken slabs of ocean crust block flowing rock from moving further sideways, forcing it to turn downwards and sink. And eventually those slabs get too heavy and break off, plunging slowly toward the core and creating a suction force that pulls mantle material along behind them. So in some ways, seafloor crust is really more like part of the conveyor belt than something riding on top of it. The continents, on the other hand, are baggage.
I'm going to attach a video made in April 2012 that clarifies deeper the understanding of these two things that academic ignorance seems to flourish around, including the extinction of the dinosaurs. But the video goes on to give the foundation of motivation for the website. I hope you can enjoy it and forgive the poor quality of the sound. Thank you.
It's April 27th,
2012.
and I'm in my Russian apartment. I've been working on the website. I'd go in reference back to the events around the death of the dinosaurs, and brings up the different theories that are being tossed around in university and modified by this bit of information. Is people largely raised in apartments, fed on book learning, but lack of just the common sense of being active in physical reality and having that common sense that comes from that experience as a child. That's the logical ability to intuitively understand things like the motion of the earth and the types of things that had to happen to cause what we see. And here's Earth, and it's showing it tilted on its axis, spinning, and there's clear things that caused this, and a clear background. It's sometimes hard to put the parts together, but I'll give you the picture. There's two main things that are responsible for the distribution of the continents on the surface of the earth. And there's one cause for the continents. the cause for the continents was the fact that the Earth faced the sun, the same face to the sun. And the dividing line where that ridge is between North and South America and Africa is what faced the sun. That face where that ridge runs through. And the truth of what formed this Pangea, it was called, was the sun's solar wind and heat with activity on the surface of the Earth from the heat that made it different from the cooling inner rock. And then the weather of that reality with water and air on the Earth, and the back of the Earth cold, ice only, and the front of the Earth a point where it's so hot it's just making steam. The water raising up into a cloud, condensing, and a ring of life around this spot facing the sun. That's where Pangea formed. And their perfect ring, too hot in the center, ice cold in the back, but a ring of life in this Pangea, this land built up from the solar heat and flux. The solar wind actually deposits particles. And then, when I say particles, I mean different atoms, the flux coming off from the nuclear reactions on the surface of the sun, the solar wind. So that's the formation, that's the background, and this process going on in the order of 5 billion years or more, in the order of billions of years, possibly 10 billion years of process here that the Earth existed in its orbit. But there's clear evidence that it was spread apart because it was hit from behind. Now, it was hit from behind in a glancing blow that the main force was to break apart Pangea, leaving that ridge down the center, and spreading the planets out and rotating. And the Alvarez hypothesis and asteroids with their cataclysmic fire events, it wasn't like that. It was a much larger object, the moon, a sixth the size of the Earth. And the moon, in a relatively slow glancing blow, with the force to break the continents apart, break Pangea into its various continents, and such an impact that it moved the continents with a terrible motion, enough to break any big eggs and to kill any big animals. The fish and the birds and the little animals are the ones that were swept along with the rush of water and air, and some survived. And the plants tended to survive. But a totally different environment. Instead of a ring of life around the Earth, then became a ring of life around the equator. Now, in what way does it spin? You know the sun rises in the east. So when you look at New York, you make it go towards the sun. So the earth began spinning this way. And it on a little bit of a tilt. The straight line is its orbit around the sun. The equator of the earth is at an angle to that, because it was not struck directly in the center from the back. Again, the earth facing the sun, like you are the sun, and you're looking at the earth, this dividing line right in the Pangaea center, that was the center of the single continent that had built up, called Pangaea. All right, and we know that it was hit in such a way that it spin, so New York comes to you before California, like that, New York and then California. But it's spinning at a little bit of a tilt that tells how the off axis, off the plane of the sun, orbit around the sun. How was it off that? It was off it in such a way, here's the way the earth was, and where would you have to apply torque to make it spin instead of spinning this way, right in the orbit, or in the plane of the Earth's orbit, but a little bit off. You can say what direction. You know that it was hit opposite this ridge, mid-Atlantic ridge. So it was hit right from behind, off center, that is the glancing blow, the movement of the moon when it hit the sun. You can tell. You can tell where it hit. It hit in such a way as to make New York move towards you. That actually it spread New York away, but make the earth spin, that then it would move towards you. So what would it have to be? It would have to be coming from this direction to hit the earth from behind, break them, and then with its glancing blow, taking enough energy out of the moon to put it in orbit around the earth. Would be in a close orbit. It hit and almost stuck to the earth, but it had this enough speed to go into to give energy to cause the earth to rotate and lose enough energy that it get captured in an orbit. Now, as far as the moon goes, as I show in my website, there is a leverage with the tide being off center that actually couples the moon and increases its orbit. It actually is being torqued by the offset of the center of the gravity between the earth and the tidal wave. So there's an actual pushing of the speeding up of the earth, of the moon, slowing down the earth. The earth is spinning faster, and the tide pushes and applies a torque, essentially to the orbit, the way it works, together with the force of gravity. All right. That's how, and the other thing how we can know this is that outer ring of what would have been here is the Pangea would have been centered here, and the outer ring of life, centered around Pangea. Africa would have been over here, and Asia would have been down into Africa. That Asia in the collision went in the collision. Asia went up from Africa, and Antarctica went down. Africa was in the middle, and on the upper hemisphere was Asia that pushed up, away and up, and Antarctica that pushed from here away and down. And we know, because there are this ring of life would have gone through, like here is the outer rim after it's been spread. This is the outer rim. This all is the back of the Earth. All these continents were pushed this way. They were on the other side. But the outer ring is this ring here, the original ring of life when it was together as the coast of Pangea. So, and you can look and you can find dinosaurs here, 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 here. You can find them in this whole ring of life. That's where life evolved, for something in the order of billions of years, around 5 billion years, it seems. Possibly 10. But so that is the background of how the continents were formed as a single continent, Pangea, and broken by the capture of the moon, hitting from behind, swiping. The moon large enough that it's like a slow collision that spread them out, and enough force on the surface of the earth, the thrust killing the big animals. The light animals survived, and the plants survived in this, what ended up being the resulting ring of life, which was Africa. Basically, Africa was the ring of life. It was on the equator. The other things had undergone so much devastation by the movement on the surface of the earth. Africa, it was the more stable, and possibly South America. But there was life on the surface of the earth, and this ring as the equator turned. All right, so that's the background, but there's another very important thing where the mountains along California and South America, those were mountains formed as they were pushed, from this side of the earth, pushed from being behind. It were when we say hit from, this was behind it, at that time. You're looking at the Pacific Ocean. You can see, actually, you can tell right where the moon hit. It was in order to have the motion that we have of the Earth now, and to know that it was exactly opposite of the mid-Atlantic ridge. It was right here where my finger is, and that would be, I'll put on my glasses and see, the impact would have been excuse me, the impact would have been at Micronesia, Coriolis, Micronesia, not far from Guam, but a little further south from Guam, at the closest identifiable island would it'd be south of Guam. It'd be a little bit north of New Guinea's right-hand side as you look at it on the globe face. But so right here is where the moon, center of the moon strike would have been. Right where my finger is. Okay. Now, the next thing is that these mountains that were formed from the collision are the mountains on the outer rim of what would have been Pangaea. So when you look at it from the Pacific Ocean, where the impact would have been, and the continents spreading on the right and on the left towards the point of impact and building mountains as the continents slid over the surface, and the inner part of the continent heavier and the outer part up, and all of the rubble from the building, from the moving process piling up. You have a ring of mountains that were formed when this land mass spread apart. When this spread apart, on the other side is where the mountains formed from that. So it would have been North and South America, and Japan and that side of Asia, and a little bit what formed from Australia, and a little bit what formed from Antarctica. But that does not explain the Appalachian Mountains, and these are older. The Appalachian Mountains are older than the 65 million years ago when the moon struck the Earth and killed the large animals. The major explanation for the Appalachian Mountains was their sedimentary rock. So are the Pacific mountains along South America. But what I want to get to is two other groups of mountains. The Appalachians are a little bit more hard to explain. They were before the collision and may have had to do with the process of Pangea, and the rocking of the lava, or that would have been a very old igneous rock formation process, and granite and so forth, the fire rocks. But there was an upheaval of these sedimentary rocks in the Appalachians that may have been part of the process of upheaval after North America moved, and the East Coast being, as the continent settled down into the mantle, the East Coast rising, part of that. The other major thing, like for the Alps and the Himalayas, that's another thing. That's a post-moon collision event, totally. It's sedimentary rock. I'm near Petrogorsk, and the Petrogorsk means 5 mountains, and I've climbed the mountains here and around the apartment, and found on the top of the mountain the fossils. There's, on the top of the mountain is sedimentary rock that was upheaved, and that brings the second, as far as Earth formation, the third thing. The first was the formation of Pangea facing the sun. The second was the strike by the moon, sending the planet into motion, being struck in the Pacific in such a way that it made the Earth spin and capture the moon. If you check the spin of the moon and the Earth, you'll see that's correct. So what caused the Himalayas and the Alps? They were caused by what we call Coriolis force. With the Earth spinning, there is a force out from the axis. Just like you can take a bucket of water on a rope and swing it, and the water won't fall out. Any child who grew up in other than a chicken coop had the freedom to feed the animals and carry the water, and every child knows you could swing the bucket around your head or swing it around in a circle. Of course, today the university people don't have that kind of comprehension. They were raised in apartments. I say raising children in chicken coops. But this Coriolis force, how that works to pull the continents down, to pull Asia towards the equator. What's the pull towards the equator? It's two forces. The Coriolis effect is two forces. Here's the Earth spinning, and that is a force directly out from the axis of rotation on every element of matter, and the force is directly related to its speed, which is directly related to its distance from the radius. The actual translational speed of a particle on the axis is 0. It's only rotating. The translation means along a straight line. If you let a particle go, does it move? If you let a particle go in the spinning on the axis, it doesn't travel anywhere. If you let a particle go without any gravitational attraction on the surface of the Earth, it continues traveling in whatever direction it was going before gravity was turned off. Of course, you don't turn off gravity, but that's the second force. So the first one is just being spun, where the particles are trying to keep going in a straight line. And that acts like a pull out. And any child who's played enough and thought about it enough on a merry-go-round understands that. Most people, you talk to a physicist from the university, and they don't know which direction they'd fall if they let go on a merry-go-round. They think they would fly out from the merry-go-round. It's not true. You would fly in the direction you were going when you let go of the merry-go-round. That's equivalent to the idea of turning off gravity. What would happen to a ball on the surface of the Earth if you turned off gravity? It wouldn't fly away from the Earth. It would fly in the direction it was moving when you turned off gravity. The same thing when you're moving on a merry-go-round. If you let go, you don't fly out from the merry-go-round. You fly in the direction you were going when you let go. So this Coriolis effect is this force effect that is holding you to the Earth. The Coriolis force is out. It's trying to get the planet free from the surface, or
The continent.
It wants to go in a straight line, and gravity is pulling it. The Coriolis effect, object in motion tends to stay in motion on a straight line unless acted on by a force. That's Newton's law. Okay, what is causing the North America to not go in a straight line? It's being acted on by a force of gravity. What is a straight line if you turned off gravity? It's in the direction that it is moving at the time you turned it off. Now, there's two forces acting here. There's the force of gravity that wants to move, separate from the surface of the Earth. That's the force of rotation, pardon me. Rotating, it wants to separate. Just like if you put water on there and spun it, the water would spin off. The continents want to separate, and they want to separate in a way that is perpendicular, in a plane perpendicular to the axis, perpendicular to the equator. Now, the force of gravity is not perpendicular to the axis. The force of gravity is to the center of the Earth. So you've got this one, the force on Asia here that is wanting to break free directly away from the axis, and another force, gravity, trying to pull it down, but towards the center of the Earth. So you've got one trying to lift it and another one pulling it towards the center of the Earth, and it's a downward pull. It's Coriolis force, or Coriolis effect, pulling Asia down into India and into Africa, creating the Alps, creating where I'm at right now in the Caucasus, creating the Himalayas. These are being, because Asia is being forced down by its rotational separation force out from the axis and its gravitational force pulling it towards the center of the Earth. Ends up with a net downward force that builds the newer mountains caused by Coriolis effect. Now, that's the reality of Earth's formation. It's a no-brainer. I'm impatient. I've understood this for years. This is 2012, the 27th of April, and let me double check that. So what can we say to put things together here? It's a no-brainer that to find that the Alvarez hypothesis is wrong, that meteor striking the Gulf of Mexico was some 200,000 years before the extinction of the dinosaurs. But it's very understandable that the moon, just discovered last year, they got samples, dug a hole and found samples of ice in the moon. Well, that's not surprising. It surprised them, but when the Earth was struck in the Pacific Ocean here, that was the cold side of the moon, and the Earth was struck by a very heavy object moving slowly, but so much force it spread the continents apart, from breaking up Pangea, and it made a smooth face on one side of the moon. Look at it. Where all the craters should be there, they aren't, because that's where it struck the Earth 65 million years ago. And picked up a bunch of ice and water. The water vapors would have probably gone long ago, but the water and ice in the down in the dirt that we discover that shouldn't be surprising. It's because it picked up the water and it struck what is now the Pacific Ocean. Of course, it would have been the cold, very cold side of the moon. But that's the story. I have a website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, where I was I'm trying to fulfill my life's work, which started at the age of 19, I guess it was, wondering what's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And I'll quickly go over the steps. What gives life meaning for intelligent life? And the worst thing we can have is solitary confinement, other than physically being beaten. But you want to torture somebody, lock them up so they can't communicate with anybody. The highest suicide rate in the world is in South Korea now, and that's just since the Korean War, when they became mechanized with the help of America. This is 2012. In 2010, December, the G20 meeting in South Korea met, and the BBC had a big presentation how well they're doing But then they said they've got a problem. They've got the highest suicide rate in the world. They've become the 15th largest economy, and they're very thankful, very affluent. Everybody's busy. But they have the highest suicide rate in the world. The major cause of death between 10 and 40 is suicide in South Korea. And then they had a priest on that run a suicide hotline and explained that it wasn't like that before the war. And what people don't understand is people need people. It's the breakdown of the home. The women are all out working now. It isn't divorce. It's the lack of home relationship. Relationships are not husband and wife. It's being together. It's the interaction that is the reality of a social relationship. And those relationships don't exist now. They don't have time together. They might be sons and daughters, but they don't have family life. And they are miserable enough that they have the highest suicide rate. So what can we do? We can understand these things. And that's another issue completely. But I was taken a job, getting prepared to be married. I'd taken a job to learn to repair office calculators. They were mechanical in that day. And I had to go to a city, Syracuse, 150 miles away to get my first work. And I was alone in my apartment. It was actually just a room. And I asked myself, what's the meaning of life? What gives life meaning for intelligent life? And that's the ontological question. What gives it meaning? Without other people, there isn't any meaning. There is meaning of a sort, but if you're the only person, it's not a gratifying life. And there's no future after you're gone. So, to have fellowship. All right, so to really understand the ontological question, you need to understand group behavior. That's sociology. So I went to Syracuse University and signed up for Sociology 101 with Professor Bell. But then continuing to reason, to really understand group behavior, you have to understand the individual, psychology. And to really understand psychology, you need to understand the brain, physiology. And to really understand physiology, you need to understand the cells that make up the brain, psychology. And to really understand the cells, you have to understand the chemicals that make them up, chemistry, the molecules that make them up, chemistry. And to really understand the molecules, you really need to understand the atoms that make them up. And to really understand atoms, you need to understand physics. And to really understand physics, you need to understand mathematics and computer. It's the language we use for describing quantitatively and modeling to see if our model behaves the way reality does. So that was my start. For not having gone to high school, I did go to high school that was 10th grade for me, for 2 weeks until I turned 16 and quit. I'd failed 2 years. But I did find out I wasn't as stupid as my teachers told me. I couldn't spell. That's a whole other story. You'd find it somewhere else, having to do with memorization versus phonetic learning. But there's a part of my brain disabled by what they did to me in school. It turns out that is the reason I can't remember names easily and spelling. But that might be a gift in a way, because I have to understand things rather than memorize them. So it motivated me. And when I went in the military, they told me I wasn't as stupid as my teachers had told me. They made me a radio repairman, and I took a test to get high school equivalency, 5 2-hour tests, and passed 2 of the 4 tests for college equivalency. So that's how I got started trying to think about how things are together and what brings them meaning. And that's the motivation for my life's work and the motivation for my website, which at this time in 2012, many parts are not connected, and because I rearranged, and some parts are missing. I have work to do with atomic models. The vortex ring basis of particles is a no-brainer anymore, but that's enough for this. I hope that it's some help to you, and that you are motivated to investigate for yourself, and the thoughts that I have are not for you memorizing and learning from me. The thoughts that I have are to share with you that you can put your experience with reality together. If you were deprived of that and indoctrinated as a child, you have a disability. But you may enjoy learning logically, even if it's not intuitive. You can't go back and give yourself common sense. You can't go back and give yourself that intuition. That comes from experiencing reality as a child before you were 12. If you were indoctrinated, that's why whether memorizing the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, you have no choice. You can submit or rebel, but you can't grow naturally. You need to respect that. You need to respect children's rights, their need for the freedom to experience reality, not indoctrination. It's a crime against humanity to indoctrinate a child before they're 12, to give them opportunity to explore and help them with the skills to quantify and to qualify what they see and speak in words, hot and cold, and then help them understand how to measure quantitatively 35 degrees or something long and short qualitatively, 5 meters quantitatively. That's a different thing. That's helping them and teaching them skills out of a need to know, rather than making them memorize a bunch of stuff that ends up disabling their individual sovereignty. Okay, I hope you get opportunity to go to the website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. Thank you.
This is the ending message. This is the website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. These are the guest rooms in our 3 homes, New York, Florida, and Russia. They are prepared for those messengers that Jesus prayed for in Luke chapter 10. And he gave them the instructions. Reading from Luke chapter 10, verse 1. After these things the Lord appointed 70 other also, and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place whither he himself would come. As Jesus said in Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am with them. Verse 2, therefore he said unto them, the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers into the harvest. This is Jesus praying for more servants and asking us to do the same. Verse 3, go your ways. Behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. Verse 4, carry neither purse nor scrip nor shoes, and salute no man on the way. Verse 5, and into whatsoever house ye enter, first say, peace be to this house. Verse 6, and if the Son of Peace be there, your peace shall rest upon it. If not, it shall return unto you again. Verse 7, and in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire. Go not from house to house. Verse 8, and into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you, eat such things as they set before you. Verse 9, and heal the sick that are therein, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come nigh unto you. Verse 10, but into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you not, go your way out into the streets of the same, and say, verse 11, even the very dust of your city, which cleaves on us, we wipe off against you. Notwithstanding, be ye sure of this, that the kingdom of God has come nigh unto you. Verse 12, but I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable in that day for Sodom than for that city. In closing, remember Matthew 18, verse 20, where Jesus said, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them.